Okay. I'm Steve Newsom for SC for Ed, and we're here with Monica Danneman, who's running for District 26. We're just going to talk a little bit about her positions on some education-related topics, and then if we have some time, we'll get into some other stuff too. So I'll just start with, what is your opinion of the current state of public education in South Carolina?
So I grew up in public education in South Carolina. I was born and raised in Rock Hill, went to public schools my whole life, and I had a good experience. Went to Northwestern for high school, and my experiences were positive in general. The school district where I live, I think that a lot of it depends on where you live, and it can even depend on exactly like what part of the district you live in some cases. Schools I went to, I thought were, you don't know in your elementary school and middle school. I like I said, thought I had good experiences with those, but as we know, funding is a lot of times based on or comes from property taxes, and so that can lead to a lot of inequity in funding for public schools. And, that's something that I am not okay with. And I would like to see more equitable funding across the boards. And I know that, in South Carolina, I think our education is chronically underfunded for the state as a whole. And I think, as far as our national rankings go, we're often towards the bottom for compared to other states for our public education or test scores. So there's definitely a lot of room for improvement as well.
Yeah, definitely. If elected, what would be the first step you would take to improve public education?
To increase funding in general, particularly for teachers, and not just teachers, but support staff as well. Both things, the certified and non-certified staff, everyone, is important. Is an important part of the whole puzzle, and so I think that it would draw higher educated teachers to our states, and may ensure that our education continues or improves, and in places where it's good, it continues to be good. I currently live in Fort Mill, and District 26 is Fort Mill, and we're blessed to have a good tax base, and so we do have more money to spend on mostly building new schools. I think that's where a lot of the funding goes, not necessarily to the teachers themselves, but to the building of new schools and making sure that they don't get overcrowded. And we have like beautiful new facilities and new high schools and everything. And I'm actually in my neighborhood, there's a brand new elementary school that's about to open up in August, assuming that schools open in August. And a lot of that comes from the property taxes, but do the teachers themselves actually make more money? I think it needs to be more equitable, and not based on your zip code.
Yeah, I think that kind of brings me to the next question, but I think that is a huge issue. What are some ways that, since you talked about kind of making funding more equitable, what are some ways do you think we could address that at the state level?
So, this is something that I guess I'm thinking more of along like a nationwide scale here. From what I have heard over the last few years, there was like the policies about, the schools that tested more poorly got less funding. And to me, that's totally backwards. If you're testing worse, that school needs more help, not less. So the places that are doing well, like great, they're already doing well. The places that seem to be struggling, let's find out why they're struggling. A lot of times it might be because the parents can't be as involved because they have to work, or all those areas where I think the parents and the extra money that the school district has makes an impact. Things like the arts are important, and having a well-rounded education, all that's important. But if you're in a district, a lower income district where you don't have as much parental involvement, like let's just hire more people who can take on that role. Have more after school programs for at-risk kids and that kind of thing.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned is testing. So, and it kind of how it plays into funding. To you, what would be like a good accountability, or like right now, a lot of our accountability is based on those tests. What does a good accountability system look like to you? Because you mentioned that sometimes the school districts with the lowest test scores are the ones that are having their funding cut rather than getting extra support. So what would be a good way of holding schools accountable?
So you mean like making sure that they're not just like not underperforming on purpose? Is that what you're saying?
Well, maybe. I guess I'm sorry. I guess that was a kind of a confusing question, but just you mentioned testing, and that's sort of our accountability system is primarily based on standardized testing right now. And like you said, it sometimes leads to situations where we're actually punishing schools that may have challenges that are creating those lower test scores. So what would a fair accountability system look like to you? Right now we use tests, and maybe we should keep doing that. I was just curious what you thought.
Okay, so I understand now. So I think I've asked, my friends who are parents, like my kids are too young to be in school, but I've asked my friends who have kids in public schools and my friends who are teachers in public schools about testing, because I wanted to hear what they had to say about it. And it seems like most people are generally okay in support of testing to some extent. The parents say, like, I want the information, I want to see how my child is performing, especially how they're performing over time. So on an individual basis, I think testing is definitely very valuable. And I think it is, it can be a good benchmark indicator for how a school is performing, but it shouldn't be the only indicator. I think there need to be other ways that we measure how a school is performing. And there needs to be like, how are students improving with the testing, not just the overall test scores. Social workers or somebody who has expertise might be able to come and evaluate, like, how are these students actually doing in school besides just their test scores? How are they being supported in school? How are they functioning in school? How are they happy? Are they, are we addressing all of their needs as a person, not just looking at just the number as a test score?
Yeah, I think that's going to be huge, especially this year when we've waived some of those tests and we're trying to do more diagnostics to see what's happened over this school closure period to students' social emotional health and stuff like that. So that will probably, what you're saying fits really well with what we're trying to figure out how to do right now.
Yeah, and COVID has just thrown a huge wrench into everything, and I know that there's a lot of uncertainty around what's going to happen next year regarding.
For sure, yeah. Do you have any thoughts, since this would be, we'd like to think that by November all this will be over, but it probably won't. So going forward, how do you think that's gonna, or what do you think is gonna be like a state level representative's part in trying to figure out how to move schools forward post COVID?
It's honestly, like, I'm not sure what a state representative, how much power I would have if elected over this. But again, like, I'm trying to listen to people in the community and, what the best evidence is as well, but also like what people's personal experiences are. Because, even though I don't have kids of my own that are school age, this is something that's a big concern, big concern for everyone who has K-12 and, even college age kids. So, so my friend who's a pediatrician sent me this information about, like, from the AAP. Can you still see me? I'm sorry, I'm reading this thing.
I can, yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you could see me when I turned moved to a different tab, but the AAP, I think just a few days ago, came out with some guidance on this, and like, they did a pretty comprehensive analysis of all of this, and so that would be like the guidelines that they have implemented would be what I would think would be the best way to go forward. Again, how much control a state legislator has over that, I don't know. I think a lot of that would be up to like the governor, school districts themselves. But if it were up to me, this is, I'll read to you. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think state legislatures right now have a huge role in how much we can implement something like those AAP guidelines, because they control all the funding that we would need. A lot of those things are great ideas. They cost a lot of money, like cleaning schools every day, providing PPE for everyone, socially distanced in classrooms, and having alternate schedules.
Right. So the thing, the guidelines that the AAP came out with, actually, the good news is that they don't recommend having alternate schedules.
Right.
You know, like A and B days, and, you know, so like doubling the class sizes or anything like that, because I think they realize that that's just not feasible financially. And it also, what is it saying? This AAP strongly advocates that all policy considerations for the coming school year should start with a goal of having students physically present in school. The importance of in-person learning is well documented. There's already evidence of the negative impacts of children because of school closures this spring. Lengthy time away from school and associated interruption of supportive services results in social isolation, making it difficult for schools to identify and address important learning deficits, as well as child and adolescent physical or sexual abuse, substance abuse, depression, etc. This in turn places children and adolescents at considerable risks of morbidity. And also it mentions the impact on food security and physical activity for children and families. So I think that all of that is very important to consider. And the guidelines that they've implemented basically say, like, let's just try to have all the kids in the classrooms wearing masks and do the best that we can, you know, 3 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart if we have to, do the best that we can to have everyone in school the normal time, but we just try to prevent the spread as much as possible. And masking, even without being 6 feet apart, has been shown to be pretty effective at stopping the spread. So all this information is just kind of coming out. Do you guys hear that?
Sorry.
There's like a high-pitched noise on my end.
Yeah, I kind of lost your audio a little bit. I heard you, but it got a little muffled.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm hearing some feedback or something. Can you still hear me? Yeah. You can still hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So anyway, like, I know that it is going to require more funding, but maybe not as much as it would be to, you know, basically double up, cut class sizes in half and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that would be, you know, if I were king and had to decide what schools we're going to do tomorrow, that would be what I would go by these guidelines.
Right.
That's released.
Right. That's good to know. Did you want to add anything else? Those were all the questions that we had.
I mean, you know, it really kind of covered most of the things that are most important to me. I know that a couple other things that people had brought up to me were like charter schools and funding for charter schools. I don't know if that's something that you guys had thought to ask about, or if there was any.
Well, sure. I mean, if there's anything that you have to say about funding charter schools, that'd be great.
Sure. So there, the jury's still out. Like, I still haven't kind of made up my affirmative on what I think about charter schools, but most people that I've talked to who work in public education are not in support of charter schools. The parents of kids that go to charter schools oftentimes seem to be pretty pleased, but I think, and I know that the law is not different from state to state as well, but I think in South Carolina, you know, it's essentially like taking away funding from public schools, even though they're not held to the same standards as public schools, like all the testing standards, which again is not necessarily the best benchmark of how a school is performing. But you know, they do get the same funding from public schools, and the people that I've spoken with basically say that they think that maybe there needs to be more oversight into what these charter schools are doing. There's too much flexibility, and some charter schools are great because they have great leadership, and others totally fail because they don't have great leadership. So that might be concerned. Like if they're going to take public money for public education, then maybe there needs to be a little bit more oversight as to what exactly they're doing, and how they're performing and how they're serving their students.
Right, that makes sense. So it sounds like you're hearing a lot about the private charter schools.
Yes. Well, the ones that I guess are publicly funded, but also do have to, I think, do some private fundraising as well. That's one that I'm thinking of. So I think there's a lot of variability as to how they're doing. There aren't any in my district right now. There are no charter schools in Fort Mill, not that I'm aware of. I think there's been talk of getting charter schools here, but the irony is that you live in a district that has great schools like Fort Mill, like you don't need a charter school. Some of the districts that might be struggling a little bit more might have charter schools because parents just need an option to send a place to send their kids. So,
right.
I think that's another sign of the inequity that you see across different districts in the state.
Yeah, for sure. That's a major issue. Thank you very much. Did you feel like you got to say everything that you wanted to? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, great. I'm gonna stop the recording then.
Okay.
Just 1 second.